organizations. We've got a great crowd for you today, including two guests, Wahl and Gabe Abella, who will introduce themselves in a moment. And the theme of our conversation today is really around exploring Agile and new ways of working with teams and organizations. Of course, Agile is not new, but what it is, how to grow it, where it's useful, has expanded dramatically since the idea was first popularized in the 2001 Manifesto for Agile Software Development. And maybe Gabe and Abby will correct me, but I think that's where a lot of Agile technology and terminology comes from. But today's Agile coaches, of course, are instrumental in helping individuals, teams, entire enterprises embrace this massive culture shift that is linked to just the new way of doing work and bringing in human-centric Agile principles, practices, and of course, values and mindset. So we're going to be exploring all of that and how it's useful in really helping to create this regenerative future that so many organizations are focused on. And as team coaches ourselves, are these practices that we really won't be able to do without? We've got lots and lots of questions to explore, but let me first hand over to Abby. Abby, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit for us?
Yeah, so my name's Abby Wahl. I'm coming to you from Dallas, Texas today, and I'm a team and organization coach. I've been working with Fortune 500s for almost 20 years now. And really heavily in the Agile space, over the last decade, I would say. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys today and especially talk about this topic because it's such a big passion of mine, just, enabling teams to do their best work. It's what I've spent the greater part of my career doing. So really excited to be here.
Thank you. And we are very excited to have you on the show. And maybe I'll hand over to Gabe, who I know there's a connection between the two of you. Gabe, tell us a little bit about you. You're not a new face to the podcast.
Yeah, no, just first of all, just really happy to see you, Carissa, Adam, and Lisa, and to be reconnected with my amazing colleague, Abby, who I've worked with on many engagements for the last several years and learned a lot from. So I have been working in large enterprises for my entire career, starting as a team member, then a team leader, then a program manager, and then took a hard pivot halfway through my career and started to focus on team and leadership development. And that's really been my obsession for the last decade. That's connected me with you, Carissa, and Ruth, and Ruth Wagman and Krister as well, and so and many other amazing practitioners in the world of team leadership development. So just really excited to be able to share some space with you today and talk about agility and what it means to us as coaches and what it means to everyone else as far as team development practitioners and leaders and team members.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I know between the two of you, you've got so many stories. We're looking forward to really bring that into the show. Lisa, over to you. Last time in the first episode, you had a last minute tech hitch. We thought that might happen again, but here you are. Yippee. Why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd? Yeah.
Thanks, Carissa. So good to see everyone. Adam, Gabe, Abby, and lovely to be here. Yeah, that last time made me sweat. Lost my internet and couldn't be on, but what a brilliant show you guys had. So it's great to be on today. My background started out as a clinical psychologist, worked in that space for years, and in fact, for about almost 13 years, worked in the collaborative law space, primarily with lawyers, and then transitioned into leadership psychology. So for the last 10 years or so, my focus has been on working primarily with senior leaders across industries across the globe. And as you can imagine, doing the work at that level, the need for the work to have a ripple effect across teams became pretty obvious. So in the last several years, a lot of my focus has been working with senior leaders and their teams navigate the challenges and opportunities presented to them. So I'm so excited today that we're actually talking about Agile because, man, that's the food, the substance of their existence right now. So I'm happy to be here with the team.
Excellent. And I know we particularly want to focus on this whole idea between leadership teams and agility. Great. And Adam.
Hey, Carissa, good to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you again. So tell us a little bit again, just a brief introduction for the audience and also what's really on your mind at the moment.
Sure. So a little brief intro, if you didn't recall from our last episode, an organizational coach over the last 20 or so years, without giving away how many years there is, just working with leadership and the organization, helping them strive for better. And I have a real interest in looking at organizations and the systems that they exist in, and reacting to some of the things that the business requires to become successful. And of course, Agile's always been, the more recent buzzword that has been, said over the last, 20 years, ever since the Agile Manifesto came out. And there's still so much learning going on in terms of what it means to be agile, and depends on what each company is currently facing. They may have different needs. So my job is to listen and to see what I can do to help clarify. So that's been my passion recently. So what's top of my mind right now is, now that it's been, again, 20 years since the manifesto has come out, and I'm speaking about the Agile Manifesto, where are we now, right? Where are teams? Are they getting the benefits that they've been looking for in this promise of Agile, right? So that's something that's been on my mind as well.
Okay, well, I think we should just really just dive in. Maybe there's Agile and there's agility. And maybe I'm just going to throw it out, maybe hand it over to you, Gabe, first. What is agility, first of all, when we talk about that?
Yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot, Carissa. And that whole idea of agile and agility. I guess for me, it's most useful to sort of put those words aside and think about what the needs are of the stakeholders of the team, and what the needs are of the organization and the stakeholders, what are they trying to achieve together. So when I think about a group, and it could be a team, it could be an organization or a department, what are they really needing in this fast-moving world right now? We can use the word VUCA. What I'm seeking to help teams do is increase their ability to sense and then adapt. Because in the context of the work that they do, or the context, the environment in which they operate their business in, a lot of things are changing. And so, in my experience of working in organizations, we tend to focus a lot on the plan, on how we wish things would go, and then just commit to that, irrespective of whether it's going well or not, irrespective of whether our stakeholders' needs have changed, irrespective of whether the business climate has pivoted or not. And that hasn't served a lot of people well, and that really hasn't served the people working in the system well either. There's nothing as demoralizing as working on something and realizing that what you've worked on and committed your time and effort for X number of days, months, or years is no longer needed, and that's or not as effective as it could have been. And so, going back to this concept of helping teams, groups, organizations collectively sense what is happening within themselves and the work that they're trying to do in relation to the environment, and then collectively adapt moving forward. And I'm using the word collectively, which is, there's a lot of ways in which one person could sense and one person could say, let's move forward and let's change this thing. But it's not an intelligent system, in my opinion. You need multiple people you need to tap into the intelligence of the organization, of the team, and collectively sense what's going on, and then collectively commit to change and adapt to what is needed in the moment, because it's ever changing.
Wonderful. Who'd like to build on that? Because Lisa, maybe you do. I can see you.
Yes, yeah. So
yes.
Gabe, I so appreciate that you focused on what's happening in the environment as well as what's happening inside the individuals. And I think quite often, I see this a lot with the leaders and teams that I'm so privileged to engage with, is that quite often they're looking at the system, the structures, the processes around, And as they're facing whatever comes in this VUCA world, this volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous world, they're looking at how can we tighten our processes and what new technology can we bring in to ensure that we are working faster and sharper, and quite often forgetting to look at, to examine what's happening in their people. Right? How are they thinking about this as individuals and as a team? Meaning, how is the personal as well as the cultural aspect of the organization impacting how they're responding to changes and to opportunities around them? So I so appreciate you focusing on that. And so a lot of the work that I find us as team coaches doing is really sinking in, leaning into that aspect of the personal side of it, and supporting leaders and teams in partnering the context, the environment, particularly understanding their important stakeholders and their needs, their interests and their opportunities, and using all that information to help them navigate the terrain that they're going through.
So help me with this, Abby. Maybe you can, Gabe. Listening to Lisa, listening to Gabe, we had originally there were 2 team coaching roles, weren't there? With Agile, there was the Scrum Master, and then there was the Agile coach. And now we have things like Agile coach, Enterprise coach. Tell me a little bit about. Can you help us just discern some of the roles that when we're talking about being a team coach or helping our clients in the way that we're describing, who's doing this, and how do we, maybe what are the different roles? We talked about the expanded roles and responsibilities around Agile.
Yeah. And I've worked actively as a Scrum Master, so I've lived in the shoes of a Scrum Master. You're kind of frontline with those teams. How do you get those improvements? But as organizations have continued to get more and more complex, and really, if you look at all these frameworks that exist, right, and there's tons of them out there. You've got Scrum, you've got Kanban, you've got, the various scaling methods with SAFe and less, right? These are all just kind of words. If you kind of boil them all down, what they're trying to give an organization is they're trying to give them a communication pattern, and they're trying to help them, put communication in, talk about work in a particular way so that they can make decisions. So tapping into exactly what, Gabe and Lisa are talking about is, just that ability to pivot, to react. How do you make a decision, and how do you put in a consistent frame to help them do that? And so as they've had to get bigger, as they've had to scale, right, you need people that are looking at the system from various lenses. So the Scrum Master is very much looking at that individual team, maybe, up to maybe 3 teams they're looking at through that lens. As you start to get into those, maybe portfolio coaches, as you get into those enterprise coaches, and those bigger and bigger roles, you're taking a larger and larger lens to the system that exists, and trying to apply the practices and the principles, just to help them make those fast decisions that are going to help them, not just survive in the market, but start to thrive and potentially even, become market leaders.
And Adam, you're going to build on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything that Abby just said plus one, but I wanted to highlight again, this kind of goes back to my observations over the last 20 years is, in the beginning, there was a very heavy focus on team, right? So the roles that you've described, very specific to a specific framework known as Scrum, very popular in the Agile space. And I think what organizations are realizing or have come to realize after implementing their own efforts into Agile is, as much as you want to try to get the outcomes that you're seeking for your organization and for your business, looking only at the teams is your limiting factor, right? So you need to broaden, just like Abby said, and look at it from a different lens, because it's wonderful. It's really a wonderful thing when you see a team beginning to thrive and really understand and live the principles and the values that Agile brings forth, but it only does so much. If you think about the team in the organization, unless you're a very, very small startup, usually organizations have more than one team and they're dealing with a lot of scaling. So when you have so many agile teams all working together at the same time, all practicing, some framework of agile, there needs to be more coordination. So there needs to be more attention at the middle layer and at the higher layer. So that's kind of what's brought about these roles, such as organizational coach, agile coaches, enterprise coaches, is companies beginning to realize, just focusing on the team is not enough. So these roles have now emerged, and there's been a very big need as they realize we can do more if we can align all these different teams all doing great work for a common purpose. So, Gabe, you want to chime in there?
I mean, just something that comes to mind, maybe this is just some encouragement for other coaches who are thinking about getting into agility or bringing it to their practice. And this is sort of a aha moment for both me, Adam, and Abby at some point in time in our career, which is agility is not an outcome. So we get a lot of people, clients, leaders, teams, hey, we want to be more agile. And for us, that's a start of a conversation. Okay, tell me more. What is it like? What does that mean to you? And they're like, oh, we're overloaded with work, or we feel overwhelmed, right? We have no control over how we do our work. We're missing resources, or our stakeholders and customers are dissatisfied. That is a very, very more meaningful discussion than saying, hey, I want to be more agile. And it oftentimes is a start of a conversation, because oftentimes when leaders are coming to you and saying they need more agile, they're coming to you because they have pain. And oftentimes they've seen a commercial or a blog about some pain reliever, and that pain reliever is called Scrum or Safe or whatever. And so now they're asking potentially for the prescription instead of the cure. So for us as coaches, we can be still super intentional about asking what do you mean by that? Where is the real pain coming from? Is it coming from internally? Is it coming from your stakeholders? And then for someone who started in sort of the agile world of learning the practices and principles and so forth, I've been lucky enough to combine that with the other team coaching practices that I've learned along the way. That's 16 conditions, that's systemic team coaching, that's Corentus model, that's ORSC. All the amazing other ways in which you can engage a team to achieve an outcome is what will make you a better coach overall. So I don't consider myself an agile coach, but there are things that I've learned through working with teams that want to be agile and learning some really sturdy practices and evidence-based practices that work, that make me more an effective coach overall.
Yeah, I want to tag on to what Gabe is saying there. I think we all had that pivot in our careers where we were just like, just knowing frameworks is not enough. It's not helping the teams, the organizations that we're working with. It's not helping them achieve the outcomes that they wanted. And so I know we all kind of had we called them our summers of learning, where it was like as many, we were going out there, we were exploring a lot of the other, coaching techniques and practices that were out there and available to enhance the agility frameworks that we already knew.
Yeah. So go ahead, Lisa. Yeah.
Thanks, Carissa. Especially as Gabe was sharing, I'm thinking of a meeting I had probably about 10 days or so ago with a team leader and her support, her HR business partner and others, as they're making the decision about engaging in team coaching. And, Gabe, as you listed off, the urgency, those things that makes it urgent, the things that team leaders want to see different because of the pain points they're experiencing in their team, there's a certain amount of urgency that the team coach is going to come in, whether it's an agile coach or, but the team coach is going to come in and they're going to fix this for them, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've had to slow things down to invite them to really embrace the process that they are going to be on, not a coach coming in to fix stuff, that this is sort of a journey can be long-term, whether it's 9 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever, that is a process they're in, because we're talking about not just processes that we're addressing culture. We're addressing people, we're addressing mindset. And those things, they don't change overnight, right? And so we as coaches have to upfront be saying to them that we're not necessarily the answer. We're not. They're the answer. We're partnering with them to unpack what their challenges and opportunities are so that we can together start figuring out what adjustments, what frameworks, what, as Abby talked about, all the frameworks. We have the tools in our tool chest, but our clients, the leaders and their teams, they're the ones who are going to help us figure out what tools we're pulling out at any given time to help them be more agile, to help them deliver on whatever business goals they have for their stakeholders, as well as developmental opportunities for their people and for maintaining their people's well-being. Because I generally say there are 3 things that I know you're focused on: the business goals, and sometimes you might be forgetting your people development as well as the well-being of your folks. So any coaching engagement should support the leader and her team or his team in focusing on those 3 aspects, whether it's agile or otherwise.
I totally agree with you, Lisa. And I'm wanting to link to something that Gabe said earlier about sense making. We're now working so much with the emergent, the speed of change, the complexity. Part of that teaching and people development is actually how to make sense of what's happening in the moment. And I wonder, Abby, Gabe, Adam, feel free, what are the ways that Agile can help to develop people's ability to listen, to discern, to really build that reflection, to make sense of what's going on?
Gabe and Adam. Oh, go ahead.
I'll chime in here, and I'm just so one thing that just jumps to the front of my for that response is the ability to see. As human beings, and we tend to forget this a lot because we have so much technology around us. So I mean, look at us here today. We're having a conversation, in different locations, different time zones, and it's not even a thing anymore. But as human beings, we respond very much to visuals. And what I mean by that is most of the work that we do, and I think when I say most, there are a lot of people that do work, obviously, in the physical space. They produce things that are actually physical products for customers. So if you're, producing, a Tesla or an iPhone, those are physical things that we can see and touch. And when it comes to building those things, they're easier to discern because you can see the end product as it's being built. But if you think about the world we live in, a good majority of it is in the services space, right? So we're of service to each other, we're of service to our customers. And when we're working in that mode, it's very hard to see a lot of the nuances when it comes to work itself. So answering your question, I think one of the most important things for me when I get involved is the team able to see the work, right? And that becomes a key component of getting to the things that Agile professes, which is shared understanding. Unless we're looking at the same picture, how do we know we're actually talking about the same work? So that always begins the conversation for me. So when a leader or a team reaches out, my first question is, can we see the work that you're talking about? And if that question stumps them, that gives me an automatic in, because that tells me that right now the team may not even be looking at the work. And when you're doing service work, it has to be represented somewhere. So in the things that we do, we try to visualize that on a board, just a very simple board. So you can say, all right, this piece of work, where is it? How far has it progressed? Who's working on it? What's the importance of it? Who's asking for it for this work to be done? So it brings up a lot of opportunities to just get to that shared understanding. So that's what jumps out for me when you ask that question.
Yeah.
Abby?
And Adam and Gabe know this. You're getting into my passion topic right now when you talk about people development, because this is something I've been spending probably the last couple of years. Like, how do you really mature a team's skill sets? And just tagging on to what Adam's saying, right? You've got to be able to see the work first. But then the next question is, okay, what skills do you need in order to do that work? And do you have enough of them? And what I find is a lot of teams and the way they're set up is that they've got kind of specialists. And that's great, except for the fact that
I think we may have lost. Oh, there we go.
She's back.
Is she back?
Am I back?
Yes, go for it again, Abby. You were just saying, except for they've got all these specialists, but
yeah. So except for the fact that that's going to impede their ability to be agile if the demand for that skill increases. And so, one of the things I've been working pretty heavily with teams on lately is how do you build the bench? How do you, share those skills? How do you build that shared understanding? How do you create a deep bench that it's like, look, yes, maybe you can't get your rock star player on that work right now, but you've got so much of that work that you need, your second and your third string that's got that skill and able to do that. And so I think that's one of the best places that we can build in the Agile industry right now is helping teams understand how to build skills and build those deep benches within the teams. It tags into some of the stuff with 16 conditions. I've probably focused a lot on right people over the last couple of years and how do you build that. But Gabe and Adam know how much of a passion topic this is for me right now because they've been watching my work over the last couple of years in this space.
Yeah, it's actually quite amazing when you can spend as much time as Abby has with multiple teams and to have a foundation for what they have and then see them grow over time is amazing. And I don't think a lot of us have that luxury sometimes. I mean, I'm more of a launch person. I come in and get them collectively aligned and move forward. But I just kind of want to, I'll add to what Adam and Abby are talking about when it comes to maybe another way in which I frame my practice, which is when you're when you're working with teams that are performing complex work in volatile environments, there is no instrument panel, there is no dashboard. So I give an example. So when you go fly, and I flew recently, and you enter the airplane, you take a look to the left, you'll see the cockpit, and there's tons of instruments about how to fly an airplane and the health of the airplane and everything you can to make sure that the airplane is in its best condition possible to make its flight. When you're doing complex work, and the way that we're engaging the work, the way that leaders are doing the work, which is very complex in volatile environments, there's no dashboard, there's no speedometer, there's no fuel gauge for them on how they're actually pursuing their work and the health of it and the state of it as they go along. So what we do is we have to teach teams to actually not just build the dashboard, but build the mirror. So a lot of the work that we do with teams is having them construct their world visually to each other and discover it. And so that could mean literally just asking someone to come instead of having a group of people, a leadership team, sit around a table and argue about or have a discussion about what's going on in the organization. You hand one of them marker and say, go to the board and can you just draw us a picture of what's really going on? And that's the start of one of our principles in working with Agile teams and helping them build their capacity to sense is that we're actually teaching them to create a model to have a conversation, and actually a skillful conversation. And you can point to something and say, hey, this is what I think. And someone can say, hey, I didn't know you thought about it that way. And that could be a completely healthy conversation. And absent of that, that could be a discussion that says, no, you're wrong. So now we're able to redirect some of our understanding or misunderstanding to a board or a piece of paper or a screen instead of another individual in the room that has the same intentions as you, but maybe has a different understanding of what's going on in the world. And so this concept of building the mirror, so me and Adam and Abby have done this at every level of organization. We do it at individual, team level, department, at an enterprise, which is how do you express to each other your current individual understanding of what's going on in the world, how the world is affecting us in pursuit of this work, and how is Abby's understanding of it different than mine, and how can it be better if we acknowledge that we're different and pursue the truth at that moment. And so we call that building the mirror. So we have to teach people how to build the mirror. Then the next part is we have to invite them to look into it. You can't actually, the mirror is a point in time of the truth, right? And so now that we've built this mirror together, and it could take 2 hours, it could take 30 minutes, it could take 3 days, it could take a long time to instrument an organization to find out what's really going on. But once you have a source of truth, then we can look at it and say, what should we do next? Now that we have an idea collectively that we at least close to understanding what the real truth is about the way that we're doing our work or the way that the environment is responding to us, what should we do next? And so now we've actually increased the intelligence, right? We've made skillful decisions, thoughtful decisions about how we proceed, as opposed to what we see most of the time is just guessing. Like a lot of the inventions that teams make on their own, leadership teams make on their own, is they just say, well, let's try this.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's sort of like just kind of throwing darts in the dark. And so that's sort of where we try and bring them to.
Yeah,
and I'm loving. Go ahead. Sorry, Adam. I'm itching to say something, but go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to add on to what Gabe is mentioning here is that, as he described, as we're helping the organization leaders and teams with creating the mirror or the sense-making tools to understand where the teams are at. There are some pitfalls I wanted to mention here, right? Because there are many ways. So if you're in a company that tends to be very metrics driven, though some of the things they're going to ask for in terms of creating a dashboard is going to be almost like second nature to them because they have so much of their other processes that may have already been dashboarded, right? So their metrics to kind of say, how much did you accomplish? So the one thing that we're always cautioning them about is make sure that those tools that we're giving them to understand or make sense of how the work is going is not always the easiest things that they can gather the information for. So I love that Gabe actually called out. It may take months, it may take years for a really good instrument to actually do the purpose of what you're trying to do, because we do see a lot of teams that are gathering data that may or may not be helpful at different levels. And that's a concept that we look for too, and we try to coach. There are metrics obviously that exist at the team level, but when the organization is trying to understand what's going on and how well their service is to their customer or their products that's being offered to their customers, using some of the team metrics may not be helpful. Right. So, and that's a caution that we always say is, be careful, because then it becomes the term is weaponized, right? Those metrics become weaponized to, provoke certain types of behaviors. So we always look at it from, is this appropriate, right? Is the sense making tool that you're providing for what you're trying to do appropriate for the situation that you're trying to do? So I can say, there is no silver bullet, but at least if you approach it from a place of curiosity, and I would apply some systems thinking to it, meaning if we're going to ask for this type of metric or this type of dashboard, what kind of behaviors are we going to create in the system, right? So we have to
I'm surprised you're not mentioning your favorite quote, Adam, the Eli Goldratt.
Yeah, that's right.
What is the quote?
Yeah, yeah, Abby, go ahead.
Adam. Go ahead.
Tell me how you're going to measure me, and I'll tell you how I'm going to behave.
Oh, okay.
From one of the authors of The Goal, right? Eli Goldratt. And that's so well encapsulates why we need to be careful of the things we implement when we try to help teams and leaders try to understand their system of work.
Thank you. I want to kind of pivot to you, Lisa, and have a conversation here, because as this idea of building a mirror and helping to reveal the truth, and I can just imagine just the huge amount of psychological safety that needs to be in the room for people to really, get up and draw how you think you see the system. If you're a member of a leadership team, like how do you, do that and save face, and just the power struggles, and just wondering, just from your perspective as you're listening to our guests here, what's coming up for you?
So what's been coming up for me, and I've been dying to jump in, it's, when Adam described the whole sense-making process, recognizing that for many of the people I serve, that's a scary engagement, right? You are asking them to walk into this room with blindfolds on. That's kind of how it feels, and stuff strewn all over the room. So they're bumping into sharp objects, scary objects, right? And so how do we as coaches prepare the space for them to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to take chances, to make mistakes? My kids used to watch Magic School Bus, and Miss Frizzle would say to get messy and make mistakes. How do we get leaders at this level to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, getting messy, and working through that? And for what I say to the teams I work with, this is the responsibility of all of us. Yes, as the coach, I come in with expertise and the experience and the tools to help open that space for you. Yet it's a partnership in creating the safety. So one tool that I draw on heavily, is having the team, for example, upfront design or expectations of conduct. How are we going to be in this space so that we can support each other, and let them come up with the ideas of how they're going to be, and let them also come up with a plan of, and so when we are not being how we need to be based on our contract, how are we going to hold each other accountable? And how are we going to do that in a respecting, caring, dare I say, loving way? The workplace is a place for love as well, right? How can we do that in a way that supports each other in being transparent, being vulnerable, not feeling ashamed to say, I don't know, or this thing is taking me into a place that's making me feel anxious. And so it's a partnership that I establish up front with the teams. And then we keep reminding ourselves of it. We go back, checking, is this working? Do we need to tweak this? Is it something else we need to add to ensure psychological safety is being improved, not just being maintained? Because as things, you guys know, we all know this, the teams are changing as we're working with them. Folks are leaving, folks are coming in, structure's changing. So what improvements do we need to make to the whole sense of being safe to ensure it's working for everyone? So it's a long-term process. And I love that Gabe said to us, this can take years, right, of developing this, because that's the reality of it.
So if you don't mind, I'll share something that Gabe and I have been doing a lot with the workshops we've been running lately. We really focus on the fact that as coaches, we're here to create the container for them to talk, right? We're not there to be experts in their context, and saying that right up front. And then the other thing that we've done is saying, look, we're going to spend, the day together. We're going to spend the next 3 days together. Describe to us what would make you walk out of this workshop saying that was awesome, and what would make you walk out of this workshop saying that was a waste. And we'll check in with them. We'll say, hey, how close are we to awesome right now? How close are we to this was a waste? So that's just some of the techniques that we've pulled out. What you're talking about, Lisa.
Yeah, Gabe, go ahead.
I'll just add really quickly. So, I mean, if you think about the work that we do as coaches, we're engaging with groups and we're engaging with teams. So, like, some of the other skills that we have to acknowledge as coaches in our success is actually developing our own facilitative skill. And so, a lot of us know a bunch of tools. The question is, can we actually create that container in a group format that gets the outcome that's intended? And I've had my own journey. I've had to intentionally learn facilitative skill. And it was a pivotal moment for me, because I thought I could always just wing it. Like, oh no, I can get in front of a group and have them do a bunch of stuff. But then to understand the skillful components of being a facilitative, a facilitative coach, I think personally for me has been a bigger breakthrough for me, in addition to the tools that I have, because, it's like Lisa, you talked about this sense of psychological safety, and we've all been in organizations where they say, "Hey, we're a psychologically safe organization." You just can't declare psychological safety. you have to model it. And so for me, I mean, I'll go by one of the lessons I live by, ABC, always be contracting. Learn it from our great mentor, Peter Hawkins. Even contracting before you get into the room and having a discussion with the leader about what behaviors they need to demonstrate to allow others to be transparent about their own work is a part of contracting. And if you walk into a room and you ask and you put the leader on the spot and they themselves haven't yet felt comfortable or thought about what it means for them personally to practice that behavior in front of their colleagues, then you've already failed. And so my own little personal thing is I think 90% of my engagements fail at the contracting stage before I even walk in the room, because I've not either made an agreement with my stakeholder or the commissioner or the leader or whatever on what it is we're trying to accomplish, or there's a misalignment. So by the time I walk in, it's already predestined to fail. Some of that can be fixed in real time with real-time contracting discussions. But I love the way you put that, Lisa, but I want to put the facilitative skill in the forefront, because we engage with groups and those groups are complex.
Yes.
And there's dynamics revealing themselves in real time that we can't hold the entire thing. And so I also have another philosophy, and this is why I've had the pleasure of working with Abby twice in the last month, which is I never coach alone. The system is too complex to read and sense on my own. So I always have someone in the room, and that's a luxury, I know, and a privilege. But it's also made me a better coach along the way.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say, Gabe, and I think we all know this, is one, your own presence as a coach. It's not beyond the facilitation tools. It's your being. It's the ability that you can exude qualities that can create a sense of stillness, of calmness, of listening, of that curiosity you mentioned in the room. Our beingness and our interconnectedness, that we are co-creating that environment is absolutely massively important, that we can co-lead in that way and model that. There's the other thing there, which is around, how do you really help to create that generative listening across a complex, large group or a team of teams? How do you generate that? And there are tools that can help you, but ultimately, unless you're aware of the own complexity of your own self, I think, that we are a complex system in ourselves. How am I showing up in this moment?
And you're part of the system.
Am I being?
Yes.
I'm part of the system.
You're affecting them.
Yeah. So I'm looking at our clock, and there's lots more I want to go. So I want to take this now back into the space of, Adam, we were talking before about how leadership teams, and now Agile was something I remember when I met you, Gabe, you said, I work, I don't work at the leadership level. I remember you telling me, I work across the organization with the people who are really doing the work. My sense is that might not be your narrative anymore. Maybe I'll put you on the spot, and ask you now. So is that still true, or have things changed a little? Yeah.
I think I've always prided myself in being able to engage all levels of the system. And now I will say, just I'm going to name something. I mean, in the coaching profession, it's like a thing that everyone wants to say. I work with the executive team. And it's like a badge, and it's a source of prestige. And I get it. And I think, because other people work at another level system, that may seem like less important. Just my own now experience in working at more specifically with leadership teams in the last 3 years. They have the same problems every other work team in the organization has. There is this may or may not be a self-importance, but I'll say that they definitely have the same needs. Everyone has the same, they're lacking the same resource. They're lacking resources, they're lacking support. In many ways, even a leadership team is a little bit of a lonely place, as lonely as being a CEO sometimes. But just understanding that they have the same problems, the same issues with communicating, with understanding their stakeholders, with the environment they have. I've just been maybe more comfort in the last several years, understanding the universal truths and pains that teams at all levels of organization have. But I will say the ability to engage at all levels of systems I feel like I'm more effective coach, because you're trying to move the entire system, not just, we say from a systems thinking perspective, if you just touch one area, you're making a local optimization. So in
Yeah.
what ways can we take a step back with the teams that we have and take a look at what our effect is on everything else going on?
Yes. And I mean, we're talking about organizations now as living systems, and we're talking about systems inspired leadership, that whole collective intelligence that you talked about. The leadership team alone, per se, or that executive team are a critical part of it. But we need to see that sense of human agency across the whole organization. We need to make sense of this fast moving system. Lisa, do you or anybody else want to add more to what Gabe said? I'd like some more stories around how our leadership teams now really calling for Agile specifically to help them with their work.
Well, first let me say, Chris, as Gabe was sharing, I was one of those coaches, Gabe, that aspired to coach at the C-suite and have been doing a great deal of that work. And the more and more I do work at that level, I began to realize the need for this kind of work at the emerging leadership level. So way down the streamline. So a huge part of my work these days, it's at the emerging leadership level, because I sincerely believe some of the most important initiatives of organizations, they live or die at that place, at that level. And so even at the work we do at, whether it's the mid-senior level or the seniors level, it has to take in consideration the impact their work has on folks downstream and vice versa. Right. And so now what it does enables me to talk with leaders more and more about not just having team coaching for one team in the organization. Well, these are our senior leaders. What about the other teams around? Because we know the benefits multiply pretty rapidly as a result of team coaching. So that's what I wanted to say there, Carissa. Now, with regards to what we have been going through, especially the last couple of years, the complexity of the challenges as well as the opportunities, I mean, it's just obvious to us. So the need today for coaches like us to partner with leaders and their team to support them in navigating has just gone through the roof. So I'm having more and more conversations these days about team coaching than I'm actually having about coaching individual executives, because organizations, they've woken up. They've seen that this is what's necessary now to help them create this environment at a much faster pace, actually. When the team sits at the table and the team is responsible for the change, whether it's change in their culture, in their process, whatever outcomes they're focused on, it's about the team. And bringing in the Agile perspective through coaching, they have found that that's a really sensible way to go.
Yeah. Abby, would you like to build on that?
Yeah. So one of the things was just kind of resonating with me is as you're talking about working with the individual teams, when I started in agility, I used to, just because I started as a Scrum Master, I used to think, oh, I'm not a real coach. And Adam and Gabe could tell you, like when we first met, I would always say, no, I'm junior to you guys. And it took me a long time to kind of feel like, okay, we were at the same level. And they were like, you're doing so much social proof building, in the organizations that we're working with, that stop thinking of yourself as junior. And so I think, my message, if Scrum Masters out there are listening to this one, is don't think of yourself as lesser just because you're working with that frontline team. You don't have, I build a reputation in the organization that I influence those senior leaders from the ground up, and I've shown them what their organization can do. And so I would say that that's kind of my coaching superpower, is that, given the opportunity, I can show you what your frontline teams can do. In a way that if you're only focused on working with leaders that, they may not be able to see, they may not be able to get it, and they may not believe you until they see it in their real organization.
I love that, Abby. There's so much power in that. There's so much power in shedding light to the senior level on what's going on down below. So love that.
Yeah. I'm curious, just to keep moving again, to hear some of the lessons that you've learned in scaling Agile, and also we've been talking a lot about the positives, but what are some of the pitfalls or some of the areas to avoid for team coaches who are now very curious about taking one of your masterclasses, Abby and Gabe, or just learning more about this? Tell us something about what you've learned about scaling Agile?
Oh, beware of the overreach. I think that's probably been my biggest mistake. You know, I forgot the rule of starting with where they are and getting them to agree. I'm a person that gets very passionate, so I get really, really excited. I take some class and I'm like, yes, we're going to bring this back to the team. And I would like force it upon them. And, you know, I'm a fairly likable person. So the team would kind of go, yeah. And then as soon as I was not looking, they would turn around and go back to working the way they were working before. So that's my big pitfall is, you know, beware of the overreach. The system will always tell you what it needs, and it's not about your ego and how smart you are. It's about what the team, you know, building the team skills, building to what they're ready for, and always putting, you know, a carrot out there for them to keep reaching, but don't make it so far away that they couldn't get there. So finding those little goals and avoiding the overreach. That's probably mine. I know Adam's got some and Gabe has some too. So I'll kick it to Adam.
For me, what jumps out is the tendency to scale too quickly. That kind of goes in line with the overreaches. As coaches, we obviously we're very passionate about what we do, and we want to try to. Our nature is to want to help, right? So a lot of times, even we get a directive from leaders to say, "Hey, go do this," and we try to take on too much. What we've learned is you need to create the social proof that Gabe and Abby was talking about, which is you need to start somewhere and you need to look for the opportunities where they're asking for it the most, right? So if you look across your organization, you look at your teams and you look at your leaders, there are probably some teams or leaders that are more willing to try something, right? And sometimes it's caused by situations, not necessarily because it's an edict, but many times it is an edict coming from, you know, top down. But you look for the leaders and the teams that are saying, "Hey, we're willing to try something different," right? And that gives you, that's almost like a signal that tells you that they're the ones more accepting of change, and that's okay. Every team, every leader deals with change very differently, but the ones that raise their hand, those are the ones I always seek out. What I try to do is I try to focus on creating excellence or behavior first, and modeling that behavior, and more importantly, sharing the narrative. So a lot of times we have coaches that do a lot of great work, but they never share what's going on in the organization, and it's a shame because you need to tell those stories across the organizations. You know, there's many different channels. You probably have, you know, some sort of newsletter within the organization, or, you know, large gatherings. Excellent. Where you might be able to kind of steal a little bit of time and say, "Hey, we just want to highlight or spotlight this team that's been doing some great work and they've been, you know, adjusting change." So that's kind of the pitfall, I would say. Don't try to scale it too quickly. Try to build on great examples first, and then you can leverage the teams and the leaders that are going through that to actually help influence other parts of the organization to next raise their hands and say, "We want to try that too." They seem to be very successful. So yeah, that's fine.
Gabe, build on that.
Yeah, I just want to, I mean, I'll connect what Abby and Adam are saying in a way that the way I view how I engage organizations, which is that ultimately we're trying to teach or have the team's organization try a new behavior and ultimately adopt that behavior. And even an individual behavior is very, very hard to adopt. And then now you're going to try and get 2 people or 3 people or 4 people or 50 people or 2,000 people to practice something called transparency, or practice something, you know, that's not necessarily built into their culture just yet. And so regardless of, I mean, I'm going to take a step away from Agile, which is regardless of what we're trying to get them to do or what might be better for them to do moving forward, it's hard to do. And so Abby used the term overreach, which is what are they ready? What are they ready for?
Yeah.
What can they do that they can take away and practice and feel good about in changing their behavior? And we, this definition of like 1 degree, like what's the 1 degree change that they could do that they could feel great about, that moves a needle for them, that we engage next time that they're still doing, right? That we can build upon that. And so, yeah, I see, I've heard another quote, like, people don't like change. People don't resist change. They resist being changed. And so in what ways can you invite them to the motivation, whether it's external or internal, to reasons and why they would want to change, 1, their individual behavior, or 2, support others around them to act and work in a different way, or respond or interact in a different way. And so that's sort of the heart of what we're doing, because otherwise I see a lot of our interventions as coaches as sort of being unsustainable, which is they only do it when we're around. That doesn't help anybody.
I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely, Gabe. And I'd like to just build on that with the word resilience, which comes up all the time. I mean, the team leaders that I talk to, one of the first questions is, we're really all struggling. How do we stay afloat, keep going, thrive, flourish? And there must be a link here between this resilience that is so much in demand and what we're talking about in terms of developing some of these new practices. Just interested in your insights there. And maybe Lisa, you can pick up on that. But
yeah, I want to hear Lisa's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So, as you said, Carissa, a lot of folks have been struggling right now with the whole idea of thriving and being resilient. That's just the reality of it, right? The situation has been so challenging for so many that we've had to be looking at resilience in different ways. And so in the past, resilience was all about bouncing back, and sometimes bouncing back quickly and better than you were before. And right now we're seeing in organizations where leaders and their teams have had to make a shift to what does that really look like? And it might mean changing expectations as to how far or how fast someone can go. It might mean we've got to modify some systems or processes in the environment to support folks, because well-being has been hit substantially over the last 2 years or so. So when we talk these days about resilience, we've got to put that a bit on a spectrum. We've got to consider the environment and the circumstances and situations around it, as well as the individual team member. What's going on with that individual team member or person? What kind of support do they need, right? Individually and as part of the team. So these days, I find myself thinking a bit differently about resilience. We're having different conversations around resilience because the pandemic, the social unrest, everything that we've been facing, it's challenging us to be much more creative in how we talk about it and how we address resilience. I mean, we could go much deeper. Maybe it's a topic for another time, because it is one of those areas where we're all trying to figure out how do we become more resilient in challenging times like these.
Yes. Okay. So, so we'll put resilience to the side and maybe go to then what are the other skills that companies really need today where Agile can help. I mean, we know about collaboration, for example, or innovation. Abby, you mentioned your passions for skilling up leaders and people in organizations. What are the skills where Agile can really help?
That
companies need.
I think what agility brings to organizations is, that ability to have a skillful conversation, to normalize their language around work, and then have skillful dialogue. We see organizations all the time trying to talk about work, and they'll come in and they'll start, a session, and like we'd be doing observation going, okay, what's the purpose of the meeting? It's not obvious, right? We know that they're not having skillful dialogue. So I would say, that's one of the skills that Agile is going to help enhance for them is that skillful dialogue.
Thank you. Gabe? What would you say to add?
I mean, systems thinking, really thinking about the effect of intervening in systems and intended and unintended consequences. As I think a big part of it, I think it's that is often negated by pressure.
Yep.
So pressure is, I'm only worried about my part, or I'm only seeing what I can see because it's what makes me comfortable. But taking that step back and thinking about the secondary effects of choices that are made by the organization, other places, I think, is definitely still something that we can bring and reinforce with leaders.
Super. Okay. Adam, do you want to quickly jump in? Because then I'd love to we're close to closing. I'd like to get some top tips from all of you that you'd like to leave, like a really big tip or insight you'd like to leave for our listeners.
So
skill.
So for me, what I could leave as a closing tip is probably one as a coach. If you're dedicating yourself as a coach, is just like Gabe always says, always be contracting. I always say, always be learning too. We've named a bunch of sense-making tools during this episode, and just to name some of them, 16 conditions, obviously one, ORSC, and even how to influence. That was one course that myself and Abby took from Robert Cialdini on his book. There are a lot of great tools that we as coaches need to continuously learn and practice ourselves. So never be satisfied with, I think I have it. I'm certified in a lot of things. Heck, I even teach a lot of things, but I always try to go back and remind myself of the teachings that I've had. And one way I do that is take the opportunity to teach others, right? What I have found,
Sure.
I'm sure most people have found this too, is until you teach somebody else, you never become what people call an expert, right? Because it's a lot harder conveying a new idea or a new behavior or a new concept to somebody until you learn it yourself personally and are very close to it. So I would say continuously learn.
Thank you. Thank you. Gabe, top tip.
I'll use the word discover, which is be curious. So anytime you're in a group with someone, actually discover the truth and discover it together.
Thank you.
That's a tip. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm taking away the building the mirror and also the need to build courage at the same time as you help people to build a mirror. Lisa, what would your top tips be?
My tip would be caring for your people includes caring for yourself. Quite often I see, myself included, leaders who are, taking the heavy load on of really trying to care for their people in all that comes with that. And sometimes at the expense of caring for him or herself. So caring for your people includes caring for yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, listen, it's been a great conversation. Really learned so much about just how you see your work. I think, Gabe and Abby, thank you so much for coming along. We've gone just over the hour, but I think that's okay in today's world. 1 or 2 minutes won't hurt anybody. And I just want to say thank you very much again. Next time, our next episode is really going to be looking at mega trends and some other big things. I know, Adam, you're big on NFTs. We've got Decentraland. We've got future cities. There's huge amounts of how can team coaches really help build the future? But for this session, thank you so much for your thoughts, your ideas, and just your love. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you,
and thanks for the
Carissa.
questions.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.